Good morning, and welcome to Redeemer Lutheran Church. I'm Pastor Gary Lodeholt. This week we're looking at 4 generations of one family in Genesis, and the first member of that family is Abraham. And the story begins in a way that always intrigues me. When I'm going somewhere, I always know where I'm headed, and before I start, I sort of map out my route in my mind for how I'm going to get there. But Abraham's story begins as he is in Haran, and God suddenly tells him to pack up everything and head out. And then God says, and when you get where I want you to be, I'll let you know. And Abraham did it. He was 75 years old at the time, and all this happened in a world where people worshiped gods made of stone. And suddenly, this old man obeys the call of God, of a God who wasn't made of stone, and he couldn't see and hold it, and with no clear ending in sight. It's stunning. Or maybe seen another way, it's faith. I'm not sure many of us would pack up everything, including flocks and herds, and head out this way. When you get there, I'll tell you to stop. He ends up in the land of Canaan, and in spite of giving his nephew the best land, it is Abraham who is blessed by God. And it is Abraham who is told by God that God will grant him whatever he most desires. There in his old age, Sarai will become pregnant and have a son. She who is barren will be the path to the future. And that's when their names change. Abram, which means exalted ancestor, becomes Abraham, which means father of a multitude. And Sarai becomes Sarah, which means princess. But here's the thing. She didn't get pregnant right away. After a while, they thought that perhaps God meant for Abraham to have a child through Sarah's handmaid, and so they tried that, which resulted in the birth of Ishmael. Ishmael becomes the father of the Arab people, but that's another story. Finally, when Abraham was 100 years old and Sarah was 90, well past childbearing years, she did finally get pregnant. And there were a couple of important things there. For 25 years, they had kept the faith that God would keep God's promise. And second, it happened when there is no other explanation for it but that this was of God. And they named the child Isaac, which means he laughs. Because when Sarah heard that she was going to have a child, she thought the idea so preposterous that she broke out in laughter. Now, there's a lot of small things that happen along the way of this story. I'm just hitting the high points. And speaking of high points, perhaps now we come to one more really important part of the story. Other religions in that day practiced child sacrifice. It was a way of showing your God how important your God was to you. And Abraham began to think that perhaps he should do that too. But Isaac was the child of the promise. And if he did it, what would happen to the promise? Nevertheless, he took Isaac and headed out. You probably know the story, how they went up the mountain and God stopped the sacrifice. God said, "This isn't our way, and I don't require that of you." And then God added, "Now you know how strong your faith is as well." The key to the story is as Abraham and Isaac went up the mountain, Isaac asked where the animal for the sacrifice was. And Abraham answered him, "God himself will provide the lamb for the sacrifice." And indeed, God did. God provided Jesus, the lamb who was sacrificed for us. What God did not require of Abraham, God did out of love for us. If you see a picture of Jerusalem, you'll see the Temple Mount, and on it now is a Muslim shrine called the Dome of the Rock. It is believed that it was on this rock that Abraham planned to sacrifice Isaac, and that's why it became the site of the temple. This moment of faith became the foundation for the place of worship for generations. Abraham became the father of a multitude, not just of people, but of faithful believers. One final thing. When Abraham died, both Isaac and Ishmael came together to bury him. And perhaps that can give us hope that eventually there will be peace in our world. Thanks for watching, and remember to let this day belong to God.